Well, let's uh let's talk about this Ukraine deal because it seems like what do you think? What's your impression of what the Trump administration is doing here? Like final negotiations, like it's now or never.
Well, let's stipulate that there's a lot we can't possibly know. There are maybe snippets here or there that are reported based on Witkoff in particular's meetings
Mhm,
with Putin.
mhm,
Um, so we're only getting a very small percentage of the information in the public domain. However, I do think, as is often the case, there might be a little bit of an overly reflexive tendency to depict the purported terms of this deal based on what's known
mhm,
as hugely hostile to Ukraine, right? Or overly solicitous of Russia, or use your preferred sort of narrative structure to continue on this years long theme of Trump being eager to submit to Putin. However, and this is not really what's been featured in the headlines, but the core crux, as I understand it, of what's being proposed here is a freeze of the front lines, which
mhm,
uh, actually, I think we might have talked about this a while ago, but this was this core stipulation was contained in the proposal that was drafted by General Keith Kellogg, who later became the special envoy for Ukraine under Trump,
mhm,
and Fred Fleitz, who was on the National Security Council in the first term under Bolton. Uh, this was like the core thrust of what was contained in that plan that was generated under the auspices of the America First Policy Institute, basically the administration in waiting, uh, last spring.
mhm,
And it runs directly contrary to what Putin and top Russian officials have always steadfastly maintained
mhm,
was a non negotiable tenet of any position they might take as to a potential
mhm,
resolution of war, which is that Putin said there must be no freeze of the front lines without a fundamental systemic resolution of their core grievances. But basically, they were saying, look, anybody who's trying to, and Putin articulated this in a June 2024 speech to the Russian Foreign Ministry, that still gets cited until maybe this week as the articulation of the Russian official position such as it exists. So, if, as the Financial Times reported yesterday, Putin has in fact agreed to halt the war on its current lines, essentially agreed to a freeze that he had adamantly suggested, along with every other top official, Lavrov on down, was intolerable, then that potentially is a fairly significant concession from the Russian side, not least because it would mean that Putin is agreeing to concede to Ukrainian control of significant parts of the territory that he had previously purported to annex. So this would upend, so it seems, much of the Russian war aims since September of 2022. And um, so a lot of the media depiction of this is going to be about how it's overly antagonistic towards Ukraine. But I think under the circumstances, it's possible to just as easily portray it as something of a capitulation by Russia. Obviously, there are other elements here that are part of this proposal. And it's not even clear, like if the terms of this proposal are like a final offer, or if they're meant to be like a yet another kind of negotiating impetus. Um, but some of the other sort of extraneous details here, and including the U.S. apparently agreeing to recognize de jure Russian control of Crimea are kind of a little bit far afield from what had been understood to be the crux of the Russian war effort. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
and also, it's like it's not even clear. Like there's nothing in this proposal that's been made public that suggests that the United States under Trump is going to cease providing weaponry and intelligence to Ukraine.
okay.
That was a big Russian grievance, right? So if that's being
Yeah.
accepted, then I think there's maybe a way to view this that is not consistent with what you're probably going to see as the popular
Yeah.
media fiction.
Yeah. By the way, Michael, can you? I don't know if you've retweeted me or tweeted out the link.
I
Can
did,
you
yeah,
do
yeah,
that? Okay, good. Anyways, have you seen this Truth Social post from Trump like an hour ago?
yeah, I did.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet, so it just came to my attention. So let me read it, and then I'll know it, and then other people can know too. He says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that quote Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. So I went to the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and I did not see that. Let's see if I Google this quote. Is this even a real quote? I mean, you never know with Trump. It's kind of given quotation marks. Yeah, it is a real quote. Well, it's a quote people are citing Trump's tweet. Hold on. This is the Guardian. Let me see.
I do think that the gist of it is a real
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Well, the exact quote is not. I mean, he with the president, you always have to assume he's just lying. So
Yeah,
okay, he's
it
just making
can't
stuff
hurt
up.
to double check.
Yeah, the city says the statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia and that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama. And is not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? The area also houses, for many years before, the Obama handover, major Russian submarine bases. It's inflammatory statements like Zelensky's that make it so difficult to settle this war. He has nothing to boast about! Exclamation point. The situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. Country and peace are capitalized here. I have nothing to do with Russia, but have much to do with wanting to save, on average, 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. The statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are close to it, very close to a deal. But the man with no cards to play, quotation marks, should now finally get it done, all caps. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete is capitalized, and total is capitalized, mess is all caps, complete and total mess that it would never have started if I were president. He's such a child that it would never have started if I were president.
I do think that Trump's most important contribution may be seen as, in retrospect, his facility with random and arbitrary capitalization, which I've also adopted, I guess, just by osmosis.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's trying to like make us like German, where they capitalize. I think they capitalize nouns. Is that it? Anyways, but not all nouns. He has his own rules. Yeah. Before let's talk about like for some people who might not be caught up with the news. So there was an Axios report 18 hours ago. That's yesterday. Saying basically yesterday afternoon, basically saying what the terms are, and it just lists them. So somebody is like, the fact that they have it this comprehensively indicates that the administration is trying to get this message out there, right?
Yeah, well, the Telegraph has a version too, so it could be that it's being presented to the European faction here of diplomats, and then that's being shared with.
And the Europeans are sure somebody wants it shared. Okay, so somebody wants to share. So de jure recognition of Russian control of Crimea, and for you non-legal scholars, de jure means actually by law. So
Oh,
the
did I
U.S.
say
would.
de jure? I don't know. I guess I mispronounced it. De jure.
I could be wrong. No, I'm illiterate. I don't know. Could be de jure. Could be de jure. I don't know. But anyways, either way, U.S. recognized control of Crimea. That's going to be like, I guess he could. He did with Golan Heights. I guess it doesn't require legislation. With like Golan Heights, they just recognized it. Jerusalem as a capital. I guess you could do that just through the executive branch. De facto,
He recognized the Moroccan annexation of Western Sahara, not the most commonly known
yeah.
annexation in world history, but that was done basically as a payoff for Morocco recognizing or normalizing relations with Israel in the first term.
Yeah, de facto recognition of the Russian occupation of nearly all of Luhansk Oblast and the occupied portions of Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. So accepting reality in kind of where Russia has control. A promise Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. The text notes that Ukraine could become a part of the European Union. So it's explicitly put in there that it could be in the EU. Lifting of sanctions imposed since 2014. Wow, so this would just make America and like Russia like a normal country again. Um, she's just recognized the Donetsk and all that. Anyways, enhance economic cooperation with the U.S., particularly in the energy and industrial sectors. Okay, what Ukraine gets, quote, a robust security guarantee involving an ad hoc group of European countries and potentially also like-minded non-European countries. The document is vague in terms of how this peacekeeping
So
operation would
to pause
function.
there for a second, because it's worth noting that another position that Russia has been adamant on is that they will not accept any NATO troops
Mm,
in Ukraine under the auspices of a peacekeeping force. Now, this could be presented as a non NATO mission, but there could be like a distinction there without a difference because if there are French or British or Polish or whatever troops stationed in Ukraine, then it's not like it's set in stone or dictated by some universal law whether those troops are covered under like an Article 5 guarantee or of any other NATO backing, even if it's not specifically categorized as a NATO mission. And whether Russia will accept that also seems a little odd. Um, so they're accepting a few core tenets here that run very much contrary to what we're told were the entire kind of reasons for watching this war in the first place, including like demilitarization.
mm.
Has Putin demilitarized Ukraine? If there's now going to be this
No.
robust
Well,
European force
let's
in Ukraine?
finish let's finish
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
finish the things. Anyways, and by the way, I did find the quote. There was a Wall Street Journal article. Zelensky did say that, so it wasn't just something Trump invented. Anyways, the return of the small part of Kharkiv Oblast that Russia's occupied. Okay, so doesn't get to keep small part of Kharkiv. Unimpeded passage of the Dnieper River, which runs along the front
And
line
that's
parts
all
of
part of
southern Ukraine.
Kharkiv. Sorry to interrupt again, but just it's worth clarifying that that part of Kharkiv that Russia could withdraw from is not
Yeah.
considered part of this historic
Yeah.
Novorossiya region. That's just sort of like this ancillary piece of
Yeah,
territory.
and Putin didn't annex it. He just claimed to annex the other four. Compensation and assistance for rebuilding does not say where the funding will come from. Other elements of the plan. This is so bizarre. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the largest facility in Europe, will be considered as Ukrainian territory, but operated by the U.S. with electricity supply
So
controlled from.
this one might stand out the most kind of brazenly. Okay, so we're now supposed to believe, and it could be true. I mean, who knows? Nobody has access to Putin's brain, despite a
Uh-huh.
whole genre of commentary flourishing that has people purporting to have that access to his brain. Um, we're not supposed to believe that Putin has accepted or will accept or is seen as likely to accept not just Ukraine retaining control over significant swaths of territory that Putin has annexed as eternal parts of the Russian Federation
Yeah.
and that have constitutionally guaranteed status within the Russian Federation, but he's actually going to concede to the US controlling
Yeah.
part of that territory with what personnel, what kind of force deployment, who knows? But if part of the idea of this war was to expel like hostile forces from Russia's border or periphery, now he's going to like consecrate it. That just seems strange. It could happen, but it does raise a question to me as to whether we're getting all the net needed information here to kind of properly interpret what's happening.
Well, okay, so yeah, so the way to look at this, I think, is that like, it's easy to just take the uh what they say publicly, right? And the question is like how much of what they say is publicly. Well, first of all, the stupid nuclear plant thing. It's just like Trump, like, and it also mentions the U.S. minerals deal. That's the last part in the article that it talks about. Trump just has this thing like, I get territory, I win. Like, what does he want from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant? I have no idea. It's just like, I'm Trump, I took over something, right? And I think the logistics of running a nuclear power plant is like pretty difficult. And like for the US to drop in and just like do it in the middle of the war zone is kind of insane. But it just seems like this is like just a small indication of like Mad King kind of a court dynamic, right? Like, I think we should take the nuclear power plant. Okay, boss, let's put it in there. Like, nobody is there saying like that's stupid, and like it doesn't help you make a deal. Like,
I
it's
mean,
not like
I think there could be a more generous interpretation.
okay,
Just throwing this out there, in that the Zaporizhia nuclear plant has always been one of the hot spots and one of
yeah,
the extreme complicating factors
okay,
to come up
yeah,
with any kind of resolution to the war. So if you want like a neutral party, so like there might be a theory by which changing control of the nuclear plant is actually something that would be pursuant to a resolution, a broader resolution. But the idea of the United States taking control of it,
yeah,
and this is located on in the Zaporizhia Oblast, which is
right,
which Putin is annexed. Um,
yeah,
that strikes me as an increasing U.S. entanglement. Leave aside the minerals deal or so-called minerals deal, which is actually much more expansive than just minerals, or at least the first iteration of it was. This is a pretty severe entanglement of the U.S.
yeah,
at like in the most
yeah,
radioactive
yeah.
or nuclear radioactive, to use, I guess, a pun, area of this potential conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It is insane. I agree. Now, look, you say like these are things that Russia would has said they wouldn't accept. The fact that Putin has changed his position, whenever they say stuff
As
publicly,
far as
you
we
have
know,
to.
he could be Putin just could be just like
He,
placating Trump or
he could
drawing
be
things out.
lying. The report could be wrong. But anyways, like you can't just take what they say publicly and say that's the end all and be all,
No,
right?
that's true.
Because you
But like
could.
they are, but there is like a tendency to portray Russia, and I think there's some justice to this, as having like this, especially Putin, as being very legalistic. Not that he won't obviously go beyond the law, or not that he doesn't think of himself as embodying the law, but they put a premium on at least nominal adherence to the law. So if
Yeah.
these oblasts have been formally incorporated into the Russian Federation, and that's what they claim that they're currently waging the war
Yeah.
to kind of protect, um, then no, obviously you can't take everything that any government says at
Yeah.
total face value. But I don't think there was any reason to doubt or to disbelieve that that actually reflected what the Russian position was.
Right. So you're hoping that that is not the full position, because if the full Russian position is at the very least we have to have territory that we have not conquered yet, and that it takes us forever. We're barely moving. We're moving at a snail's pace. If that's like in their minds, this is legally like the thing we have to do, or national security, or for a safe face, or whatever. Then we're in a bad position. And if we find out that's the case, then everyone has to walk away. Right. I think that's the thinking of the Trump administration. But Ukraine, when Zelensky said we're not going to recognize Crimea, he also used this legalistic language in this Wall Street Journal, the
Right.
Wall Street Journal quotes, where he says that's against our constitution.
And
Like, okay,
I don't even think that the
so
U.S. proposal is for Ukraine to recognize Crimea.
yeah,
The
right.
U.S.
Okay,
will.
so maybe this is a loophole that we could get into.